Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. And if you've been listening, I talk to business leaders in Asia. And today, I don't have a guest again. So today is a solo episode. So actually, I want to talk about what I learned from 30 episodes. So starting off with episode one. So I'm actually looking at the episodes list and I'll recall what top of mind I learned and why you should listen to that episode. So top of mind, and actually a backstory about this. So I always wanted to start a podcast. I thought about it. I used to have a podcast and I used to talk to marketing leaders. There was a show, if you Google me, there's a show called The Bob Lowe Show. And at that point of time, I was a head of growth at a startup. I was leaving my role in marketing at a corporate. And I was very fiercely interested in marketing. Now I am an entrepreneur myself, so my priorities has changed. So that show stopped because I was not so much interested in marketing, and at that point of time I didn't know a way of scaling it, and I didn't know how to manage and distribute the content, and I didn't want to invest in editing the content as well. So now I found a way around that, and I found something I'm passionate about. So I am an avid listener of podcasts. I listen to 3 podcasts per day, at least. It can be a YouTube video, minimum of 20 minutes, 3 podcasts per day. And what I found was when, let's say I want to learn from CEOs in Malaysia, CEOs in Singapore or Hong Kong, I cannot find a podcast about this. Today, I found a few. Maybe I'll share that in another episode. I found a few, including this podcast called Empires, and there's this podcast called Brave as well. But there's no podcast dedicated to business in Asia. So that's the reason I like to share stories from business leaders in Asia. So backstory, I was in a cafe. So it was Chai Sing Huat Hardware Store in Singapore. All right. So I was in Singapore and I was talking to, my guest, Kenneth Chu, about starting a podcast. And we talked about, and I'm a marketer. So I don't just start something and stop. So how I can get long-term traction, how I can get this podcast off the ground and get to as many episodes, and how do I sustain it, right? So today we are at, as this podcast will come out, it will be 30 plus episodes. So I had a coffee with Kenneth Shu and we talked about how to sustain a podcast, including how you can have a constant flow of guests. That is the hardest part. Reaching out to guests is one of the hardest parts of the podcast. How you can get a constant flow of guests, how you can distribute the podcast, how you can edit the podcast. So had that conversation, came back and just started doing it. So that brings me to my first guest. So my first guest is a dear friend, is the CEO of Iconic Co-working Space, and she will play a big role in the start of the podcast. So I talked to her in the first episode, from sales to entrepreneurship. So she is a dear friend. And if you listen to this episode, it sounds like a conversation. It's not really an interview. I asked her about her experience of selling encyclopedias, from encyclopedias to right now exiting a company and then now owning a co-working space. So it's a good conversation. And because of her, she has led me to my next guest. And I will come back to that as well. So you should listen to it. It's a casual conversation on her journey as an entrepreneur. And the reason why I love this podcast is because I love the art of business. It's very hard to have a sustainable business, to start a business, have a sustainable business. So most of my guests are business leaders. And my favorite thing to ponder is how they started and how they are currently doing their business. Second guest I have is Dr. Mazlan Abbas, right? So first doctor on my podcast, and something that is very interesting. So I talked to him about IoT and smart cities. So how I found Dr. Mazlan was he has a lot of content. He has a podcast called Gunala IoT, and he has a lot of content on LinkedIn. I featured him as one of the founders to follow in Malaysia. So I talked to him about what is an IoT, what makes a smart cities, what is the smartest city in the world was the question I asked him. So it is basically using technology in day to day in different scenarios to solve problems, right? So right now with internet, with connectivity, there is a lot of things we can do with technology to solve problems. And he actually breaks down what makes an IoT. So do check out that episode. Episode 3, I actually interviewed a client of mine, which is Joanna Ong Ash. And I talked to her. She was her story of having a senior role from a senior role in marketing to today running her own consultancy. And if you listen to that episode, she actually talked about her passion, which is numerology, and she did a numerology reading for me. So do check out that episode. Episode 4, something close to my heart as well, and I did share something personal in that episode, and I hope to, as of this recording, I've not catch up with Anna Chu in person. Hope to catch up with her. So we talk about the future of elder care and something new and innovative business that Anna Chu has founded, Ryu Living, on how she came about this business and the future of this business that is very important to all of us, which is elder care. And after Anna Chu, so Anna Chu was connected to Sharon, right? So from Sharon, from Anna Chu engaging with my content, that's how I reached out to her. And then that brings me to episode 5, which is also a recommendation, highly recommended by Sharon to talk to her, which is Cindy Wong, where I talked to her about how she built a local Malaysian award-winning tea brand. And that tea brand is in all the major stores in Malaysia. How she persisted to work with different stakeholders to get her tea brand into the stores in Malaysia. What different ingredients. I actually drank the tea during the podcast as well. So do check out that episode. Episode 6 is very interesting. I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and his name is Sao Yong, right? So from Sharon. So this is someone who commented on Sharon's post. That's how I discovered. So Sao Yong is very interesting. He is a pilot in one of the major airlines. So I shall not say the airline, but he's a pilot. And we talked about leadership. What was his favorite leader? He has a leadership training company called PIX. So the episode is called Leadership in the Skies. I asked him leadership questions. What is his favorite leader? And also a very personal question I asked him, and I still listen to that today before I fly, which is how to overcome the fear of flying. So I get to hear it from the pilot's mouth. I asked him my different questions, and different questions or conceptions I have about flying. And that it was a very good episode and opened a lot of doors for me with many guests in Singapore. Let me see. Here's my second guest from Singapore. And the next guest, episode 7, is someone that I've been connected for some time, Benjamin Low, a very successful speaking training business. So I managed to talk to him, ask him how to grow a training business, how to get his opportunities, how to start out, and tips on speaking, how his training, speaking stories as well. And how he evolved throughout the years from having his first TEDx speech. So if you want to learn about speaking, that is the podcast you should check out. From this speaker to another speaker. So there's a list of speakers in the podcast guests as well. So the next one is my friend Rizal Aziz. All right. So Rizal Aziz. Yeah. So Rizal Aziz is, I just saw a spelling mistake, so I'm getting to that after this. So Reza Aziz is a dear friend, and we actually caught out for coffee, and he actually shared he is in the scene in training. So I asked him questions about his experience in corporate, his experience working in different countries from Australia to Japan, and what it means to be an incomplete leader. And at the end of the podcast, we talked a lot about his passion, which is racing as well, go-karting and racing. And next guest is from Singapore. So at the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned him, Kenneth Chu. His Mompreneur podcast is right now over 100 episodes, and he talks to mom entrepreneurs, a great networker and a great way. He has a lot of moms and entrepreneurs, so very inspiring. So I talked to him about his podcast. Actually, I gained a lot from Kenneth as an entrepreneur. When I met him in Singapore, I asked him about time management. So in this podcast, I asked him the same questions as well. How does he get his guests? How does he sustain his podcast? And I asked him some questions on NFT and also the metaverse as well. So moving from Kenneth, so this is a recommendation from Sharon, right? From episode 1, Sharon recommended that I speak to Siva Srinivasan. So I'm actually scheduled as of this recording to have coffee with him on Monday. And Siva actually has written 2 books that I I borrowed from Sharon. So his book, Reclaim Your Right to Success, and also a book on DISC as well. So we talked about his 2 books, from his stories working with 3 influential leaders to the DISC framework. So that is a great podcast to check out, a very interesting conversation. Episode 11 is someone I reached out to, I believe the first LinkedIn top voice on my podcast, Helene Lee, originally from Hangzhou. And the reason why I remember this is because my podcast, I always ask the first question, which is, what is your favorite Kung Fu movie? And she said, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And that scene on the dancing on the swords was filmed in Hangzhou. And she shared a lot about sustainability, how it is not really just, having that position in a company. There's a lot of things that need to happen, including financing, educating, and there will be new roles being created in the sustainability space. So do check out if you are looking to learn about sustainability. Episode 12 is actually a connection from Cindy. And in episode 12, I talked to Yan Chiu, who is my first, or not my first TEDx speaker, but he is a TEDx speaker. And I talked to him about deeper conversations on his story of talking to thousands of people in his project, Deeper Conversations. And I talked to him about how to have deeper conversations as well. And then moving on to Robin Yu from Singapore, director of Agile 8, asked him about his 2 businesses. He has a corporate secretary business, and basically his main way of growing his business is through networking. So I asked him a lot of questions about networking. Moving on from Rizal, I got to know Sufis Muhammad Sufyan. So Sufis is a gamification expert. So I actually talked to him about the different types of gamers, how to gamify a lot of things, and how does games affect our lives. And if I remember correctly, there's the different types of gamers, and I actually did a quiz, and I am the type of gamer I'm an achiever. So learn more about that in that podcast. And then we have Nicolas Clement, who is founder of Nego Asia, and he talked about the art of negotiation, one of the podcasts that I learned a lot from. And he talked about how one of his stories of negotiating for his client, and he is actually based in Bangkok. And yeah, I actually reached out to him from wishing him happy birthday and asked him to be on my podcast. So yeah, great episode if you want to learn about negotiation. And he is the first certified Wing Chun instructor on the pod. And he has learned many other martial arts as well. So he's the first certified Wing Chun. So if you watch the episode, there's a dummy behind that he practices his Wing Chun. All right, so that's a great episode. Next one, moving back to Malaysia. So I had Faisal Sohami talking about B2B sales strategies. Great episode. I learned so much. I was like, oh my God, I've done these mistakes. This is how you build relationship for a multi-million-dollar B2B deal. And it was a great podcast. I learned so much, and I have yet to meet Faisal. So I have to get into him as well. Next episode is Crystal Go from Singapore, founder of GrowPR. So I worked closely with Crystal for many years, and she shared how to build relationships on LinkedIn with media. So great episode to learn about the media landscape and how you can get media attention, and ask her about different stories, media opportunities in Asia. So great episode to check out. Next episode, another LinkedIn top voice, which is Sha Eun Yo. So now we are episode 18. Sha Eun actually shared a lot about happiness. I asked her questions. I think one of the questions I remember asking was, how do you balance contentment and the drive for success? So do check out that episode. It's a very candid conversation and a lot of personal questions in that episode. So do check out if you want to learn about the science of happiness. And next guest, episode 19, I have Jingjin Liu, one of the ones I really enjoyed. All right, so this is a very juicy episode. I don't get to talk to sexual. So Jingjin is a sexual wellness expert. So actually, she empowers females in the workplace. So one of the things she talks about is sexual wellness. So if you have good sexual relationships, you will be more confident, and from confidence in the bedroom to confidence in the boardroom. So listen to this episode if you like to see me ask questions about sex. So that's a very juicy episode. Do listen to it. And then after that, I caught up with a friend, Liling, for an episode talking about digitalization. This is a very technical episode talking about what is digitalization and how a few stories of how she helped these companies. And she is based in KL, so do connect with her as well. So Liling Chang from VLAN Asia. And next, I talked to a friend called Andrew Wong, episode 21 from Ants Digital. So we talked a lot about email marketing, but we talked a lot about clubbing as well. So we made the analogy of clubbing and email marketing and how you get emails and how you can increase your open rates, etc. So if you want to get geeky about email marketing, do check out the episode. Email is so important for all our businesses, right? It is the main communication tool. So do check out the episode. Next, another LinkedIn top voice, which is Ratna Juwita. And I talked to her about well-being. I asked her questions about journaling, about work-life balance, about mental health, and about meditation as well. How do you have a meditation habit? So that is a great episode to check out. And next, I have more on growth. So I talked to Chia Kawai, who is the co-founder of Superdo, and we talked about how he grew his retail immersive experience business. So immersive experience basically is a escape room experience. So I've actually personally experienced this. I've been to his escape room. It is called Hontu. So this escape room is something that is very interesting. I actually went through it. It is a story of a haunted hotel. A crime scene at a hotel, and you go through it. So they changed the story. So I asked him questions of how he grew the business, how he sustains it, how he came up with the business, what roles his partners play, etc., and what are his future plans. Next one, I have a guest from Malaysia as well, Azlin Abdul Rahim, great guest. I asked him because he created a platform called Marketing in Asia. So I asked him, and he featured me a few times in his list of profiles to follow on LinkedIn. So I asked him questions. He actually exited his company, sold his company for a good amount. If I remember correctly, a few $100,000. And he actually sold the business, exited, and I asked him about how he built his content platform. Basically, he has a lot of beliefs in organic marketing, SEO, etc. And he's building up this content platform and managed to sell it off as well. So I asked him all those strategies on how he built a content marketing asset. Episode 25, very interesting. I talked to Andrew Liu and he shared with me. I asked him personal questions of how to be healthy, how to eat, how to exercise, what are the main issues that busy professionals face when it comes to health and fitness, how to overcome them, what are the main misconceptions. I asked him about certain exercises as well. So do check out that episode. Episode 26 is an episode I talked to Pang Sen Yong, who was featured on BFM. And that's how I discovered him. And I talked to him about the buzzword of this year, right? AI ChatGPT. And we talked about how to use it, what are the other AI platforms out there that we should check out, and how you can use, and why is it important, and how you can equip your business for AI. So check out that episode. And then episode 27, I talked to the leaders of leaders. So this came out recently, and it was Chen Chen Yo, founder of Essence. So I talked to her about her book, her experience with leadership, how and the main clip I got out of this episode was, what is your advice to Asian business leaders? And she shared that as well. So do check out the episode. It's a great episode on leadership, and I learned what is agile. So check that out as well. So as of this recording, episode 29 is not published, so but I'll talk about it anyway. So today supposed to be published is an episode with Kim Pong, where I talked about the power of conversations, the power of talking, and so many things I learned, the different types of communications, the best way of communicating, how you should use sound waves, which is his product, to identify your communication style, and the best way to communicate to people. And yeah, it's basically being very, very careful and aware of your communication style and how you should communicate. So do check out the episode to learn how you can communicate better as a leader. And one of the things that he shared is how you can communicate, how you can have authority without a title, right? So that's something that I discussed with him in the podcast. And another podcast should be episode 30, which is my episode with Cheyenne Sia, right? So Cheyenne Sia is in Chiang Mai, and she's an ADHD coach. So I believe, I've not been diagnosed, but I believe I have ADHD, and I've took online surveys that verify that. The only thing I have not done is the assessment, which would confirm, and I think I have a lot of ADHD symptoms. So I decided to speak to her, and I have a lot of friends who suffer from ADHD, and one who has been clinically diagnosed as well. So I asked her questions on how to manage ADHD. I learned so much in that podcast that helped me with my work today, and helped me to realize I used to struggle. So personally, I used to struggle with doing tasks that are just tedious, like cleaning data, submitting my taxes, cleaning data in Excel sheets. So if I have ADHD symptoms, those are tasks that are very difficult for me. And how to manage it, including how do you manage your time, how do you manage what supplements you can take, how can you manage communication with people and expectations when you are having ADHD. So that is a great episode, and personally one that I learned the most from. So yes, those are 30 episodes and many more to come. So I'm excited. I would have a lot of exciting guests coming out, including CEOs of public listed companies here in Malaysia. I hope to get more in Singapore and many more in other Asian countries. So at this point of time, I've not had guests from countries outside of Malaysia and Singapore. So I'm looking for guests in Hong Kong, guests in Vietnam, and other Asian countries can be Indonesia, Philippines. So I'm really looking for these guests, and I'm excited. Many guests lining up that I'm very excited about. So look forward to you listening to this podcast. Thank you so much. And okay, so maybe let me just plug a bit. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button. And if you are listening to this on Spotify, please help me out by clicking on giving me a rating on Spotify. Thank you so much. I'll see you at the next episode.